So let's build a React app here. That's the second part. And I'll still answer some questions, of course, along the way. And the app I want to build, now come my awesome, I guess not drawing skills, but sketching skills. The app I want to build is a React app here. Okay, can we? Yeah, so I want to build a React app. And that React app should actually allow us to generate an image. It's weird, I'm not seeing the text as I'm typing, but that's okay. It should generate an image here with AI. Now, for the image generation, let me move that here and here so that it's not hidden by my face. So for the image generation here, I will use a service called Replicate. Replicate is a service that allows you to run a lot of AI models through their API, so that you don't have to run them on your system, which might not even be possible for a lot of models. And so that you don't necessarily have to like reach out to 10 different providers, but instead you can use this one API and use a lot of models, like the Flux image generation models, which is what I'll use here. So I will actually use the, let me see, the Flux 1 Pro model. I'll use this. And essentially we're going to build something like this here. A simplified UI where we can enter a prompt. I can't do it here because I'm not logged in, but we will be able to do it in our app here. And then we can also tweak some parameters and we'll generate an image. That is what I want to build. So that will be my backend. Now, I will not directly communicate with that backend here though. Instead, I will actually build my own backend in between. So my own Node Express backend. One reason is because it's fun, but also because I don't want to expose my API key. I will need an API key to communicate with Replicate. I don't want to have that in my frontend application, and that is why I will have my own backend in between. And I also want to enforce authentication there so that people have to log in with my backend here. So people in the React app have to log in with help of my backend, and only logged in users can then send a request to my backend here, and then my backend talks to Replicate, will get back an image, send the image to the React app and show it there. That is the plan. What program am I using for sketching? I am using Excalidraw. That is excalidraw.com. That's what I'm using here. Okay, so that is the plan. Now, for that, I will create a new project, a new React project, obviously, with Vite. So let's do our create Vite at latest, and I'll name it React Image Gen, something like this. Pick React, and I'll use JavaScript here. Keep things a bit simpler. I think it will be long enough anyways without writing types, so that's what I'll do. And then I can actually open this with VS Code. Here we go. Let me see. Want to make sure that this is all looking good. Yeah, we'll see if that is too big. I also want to change my color theme here. Okay, it's not available here. Doesn't matter. So that will be the project. Now in there, I'll also I'll create a backend folder. I will have both in one project, simply to keep things a bit simpler. And in there, in this backend folder, We can initialize a node.js application here. I'll use ES modules by setting type to module here. And I'll also add a dev script to start a development server. And previously, to have like auto reload, you would have used something like nodemon. Now with modern Node.js, you can actually use its built-in watch mode to watch the app.js file, which I'll also add, which will then hold my actual application. Now in the git ignore file, I already am ignoring node modules. That's all good. And I'm also I'm not ignoring .env files. I will do that as well because I will soon use a .env file to store my replicate API key. Thoughts on editors? Cursor, AI, JetBrains. On your experience, which is the best one besides VS Code? It's really, I think there is no best one. I like VS Code a lot. I have used quite a bit of new Vim the last weeks because like all the hardcore developers use Vim and are really good in Vim, and I never was good in it because I did not care. So I learned a lot about it, and now I'm not horrible anymore. But then actually I found out that I maybe just might want to also look for more shortcuts I could use in VS Code. And I found some interesting ones. So now I'm back to VS Code because I feel like I can be equally productive there. So yeah. And regarding other editors, I have used WebStorm a couple of years ago. It's really whatever you like is the best editor. There is no clear winner. Okay, so let me now git init this whole thing. Whoops, that was the wrong folder. That is better. So, and let's do our initial commit. Okay, and now the question is, do we start with the backend or the front end? Do you have any preferences? Backend or front end first? What do you prefer? Backend. Backend. Backend, backend. Okay, backend it is. So let's start with the backend then. I will start by first of all installing Express, the Express framework, because that is what I'll be using there. Whoops. And I also want to install bcrypt.js for hashing passwords for the authentication, JSON Web Token for creating JSON Web Tokens, because I'll only create a very simple authentication flow here, not a super great one. We won't have like email password resets. We won't have any of that. I'll just create some JSON Web Tokens. I'll hash my passwords, and that will be it here. So I'll install these two packages as well. Yeah, get them. And then with that, we can get started here. So first things first. Oh, I'll also install better SQLite 3 because I'll store everything in a SQLite database here. If I can quickly mention why Express versus Next.js. You could of course absolutely also do it with Next.js. I just felt like building separate projects here, a separate API, a decoupled API. No real other reason than just something I wanted to do here. We can maybe build it with Next.js in a future stream. That might be interesting too. Will you use any tool for code generation with this project? I will. Good point. GitHub Copilot, enable. What is it? Enable Copilot. Why can't I? Oh, I think the extension is disabled here in this profile. Let me see. Yeah, let me enable this. So actually, enable. Let's see, is it enabled now? Import express from, yeah, looks enabled. So I got this, and we'll actually not just use a Copilot for suggestions, but we can try out something else. We can use the Copilot edits screen here. And I guess this is now behind me, so let me bring that over here. And I don't need the secondary sidebar. So we can use GitHub Copilot edits. And what this is essentially it's the compose mode of GitHub Copilot. So it's not the chat. It does have a chat, but it's not just the chat. Instead, this is the mode that should hopefully be able to work across multiple files and automatically manipulate those files and make a plan and stuff like this. So here we can say, build a backend REST API with a sign up and a login route. Use JWT for authentication. Use bcrypt.js for hashing passwords. Users must have an email and password. The password must be at least 7 characters long. Yeah, I guess that's a good start. We can add the image generation part later. Let's see what this does for us. And I can use, you're saying the Claude model is better. Okay, let's go to Claude 3.5 and let's give this a try. Let's generate some code. And that shouldn't be too difficult of a code. Okay, what do you want from me? That shouldn't, why is it opening this window? Interesting. Is that because it tried to generate files and that's not working for some reason here? It's sending the files, yeah, but I tried it before. And there it worked without that. But sure, let's try again, I guess. And I can accept the files. So, but it's the totally wrong folder here. Backend. Okay, it's untitled. I don't know what that should be. Is that the auth.js file? Is that the app.js file, which I replace? I don't know what it's doing. That's really not a useful interface. Let's name it A.js and let's see what's in there. And B.js. And C.js. And okay, what's happening here? Is this the future? Okay, this is not getting us anywhere. Yeah, I'm going to host a recording on YouTube thereafter. Okay, so it made me create a bunch of files which are now all empty. Awesome. Okay, so that is the future we're witnessing here. That is amazing, of course. Okay, so let's maybe help this a little bit. Let's add an auth.js file. And let's add a db.js file. And yeah, let's try 4.0 if that makes any difference. By the way, one thing I can already see, it's telling me that it installs Mongoose. Makes absolutely no sense, because in my package.json file, I already got better SQLite free. So it would be obvious that I want to use SQLite free and not MongoDB. But does not matter. I'll give this one last try. If this does not work, we'll go back to using GitHub Copilot for auto-completion. Ah, now something's happening. Okay, now something's happening. It's again using Mongoose, and it's using common.js instead of ESM for imports. So we'll have to fix this. Okay, I guess it's done. Okay, so it did not add anything to the auth.js file, did not add anything to the app.js file, even though I started writing code in there already. Instead, it gave me a server.js file. Okay, that's fine. We can copy that over. It's using common.js instead of ESM. It's using Mongoose instead of SQLite. It gave me the 2 routes I requested. It's extracting the body. It's performing the validation I asked for. It's sending back a status code and an error response. Obviously, it's then using a user model, which doesn't exist. Where is user? Where is this coming from? From DB. Ah, okay, it's the Mongoose user model there. Okay, it's doing that. I think I'm hiding a bit with my face, right? So that's that. Yeah. Okay, so we'll have to rewrite quite a bit here. And that's what I meant before. I mean, I did not fake this or anything, right? And I tried it before and it worked a bit better, to be honest. But this is what can happen. And obviously, if you don't know how to code, you now have to figure out what this strange Mongoose thing is. And this code alone won't work. It won't work. You need to set up a MongoDB database and stuff like that. But anyways, I'll fix this. So let's just replace all that here. Actually, it can replace that for me. Replace with ESM. Let's see. Okay, better. So that's the part where it is useful. So that is what I actually like about it. If you have like mass edits you want to perform, obviously you can also do that with shortcuts, stuff like that. But using LLMs for that can be pretty useful. Now, I won't have a user model here, though. I also won't have Mongoose. Instead here, I also won't have my password hashing logic in here. This can all go here, really. Instead, I want to import the better SQLite free package and then create a new database. Let's name it app.db. And maybe just export it here. We might, we can keep the file. We could also add the logic for interacting with the database here, but here I'll just export the database handle. And then with that, I have my imports here. I'm creating my Express server. I don't need bcrypt here. I will outsource this into the auth.js file and perform the actual logic there. And then with that, we're parsing incoming JSON data. I have my secret key here. I want to have that from my env file. So from the environment variables, the JWT secret key. And I actually also don't need that in that file. I need that in the auth.js file. And then I can go to my env file, which I haven't created yet. I can go to that and then store my secret there. Okay. So then I have my routes here, post and login, and that's good. I need them. I got my server starting here. But the logic here, I'll keep parts of the logic in these routes, but I will outsource the part where I actually create the user into the auth.js file. So there I'll export a function, create user, where I expect to get an email and a password. And I'll export another function, login, where I also get an email and a password. And I want to use these functions here. So here I will call create user. Okay, why create user like this. and forward email and password, and I'll hash the password in the create user function. And then down here, I don't need this. Instead here, I'll call my login function forward email password and then perform my actual login logic there. And then send back a response later and so on, of course. Okay, so let's start with creating a user. I got my validation here, which looks good to me. So now we're passing a validated email and password to create user. Actually, for the validation, I actually also want to trim my password so that you can't just submit a bunch of spaces. And I should then not have to check. Yeah, well, if it's undefined, makes sense. And for the email, I also want to check if maybe my email does not include an @ symbol. It's a very simple check, of course. You can submit email addresses that have an @ symbol and are still not valid, but it is better than nothing. It will do for here. So with that, I have the validation. Then I create my user here in auth.js. Now, in create user, we now need to do a bunch of stuff. Okay, let's accept those suggestions. What are we doing here? We're hashing the password with bcrypt. I want to use a bigger salt here because that in the end will control how safe the hash is, so how easy it is to guess, if you want to call it like this. I don't need the log statements. Thank you very much. And then I indeed want to interact with my database. However, I actually don't want to start with hashing the password. Instead, I first want to check whether I have a user already. And by the way, I, of course, also should execute a database command here when I connect to the database, so to say, where I create a user table. So here I want to create a users table if it does not exist yet. And in there, I want to have an ID, email, and password. Here's another good thing, by the way. You see auto increment here, right? And that makes sense, right? Because the ID should be auto incrementing. We don't want to manage it manually. So that makes sense. Where's my browser? Here. Well, let's see. We're using SQLite. And let's take a look at the official documentation. The auto increment keyword imposes extra CPU, memory, disk space, and disk I/O overhead, and should be avoided if not strictly needed. It is usually not needed. So that's a problem. Too much bad code on which the AI was trained. Auto increment should not be here. It's of course not a big thing, but you get my point here. And I'm not doing this to prove how bad AI is. Really not my mission here. It's just the tiny things I want to highlight. Okay. Why not separate the logic and user model management concerns? Yeah, you could do that. I'm trying to find the right balance here. I don't want to build like a super complex application because at some point this thing should be done, and the danger is that it will take forever if we make it too complex. But you could, of course, absolutely like build a user model, have your logic in there. You could do all these things. How do you create those annotations on the fly? I'm not sure which annotations you mean, unfortunately. Could you let me know what you mean there? Why 12? Is there any particular reason for that? 12 is, so to be very honest, the last time I checked what the current consensus is, 12 was, if I recall, seen as a good value for salting. Yeah, we had some nice AI demonstrations. That is true. The red squares. Oh, you mean like this thing here, right? These annotations. I'm creating them with help of a tool called Demo Pro. Help. Okay, I don't get the About You page. It's called Demo Pro. That's the tool I'm using. It's on the different screen. Here it is, Demo Pro. I think it's only available on Mac. Not sure though. I'm using that. How am I auto formatting with the prettier extension and then the auto format shortcut, the format document shortcut in VS Code, which for me is this one here. Okay, so now we have the table, if it doesn't exist, with an ID, email, and password. Max, I used to have these bad recommendations from an AI on cursor. Then I made a clean cursor rules or something job description for initial chat to force AI to make better and more secure codes. And that is a good idea. You can, of course, add your own instructions to AI. You can, for cursor, you can set up your own instruction document, essentially. And that might be a good idea. That is true. You obviously might want to fine-tune this for the different technologies you're using. Okay, so we got the DB created, and we got the email and password columns in there. So now when we create a new user, what I want to do is I want to prepare a statement here. Oh, sorry. One other thing I also want to do in the database, I want to enable journal mode and set it to wall. It's a different mode of using SQLite under the hood, you could say, that makes it more performant. But now, finally, creating a user, I want to first prepare a statement where I check whether a user with a given email address already exists. Alternatively, we could, of course, also rely on this email column here being unique, and we should get an error if we try to insert a user that does exist already. Here, I'll query first because then I can also avoid hashing the password, which also costs a bit of performance, if I already know that we won't succeed. So here, I'll select, and that's where AI is really useful. I'll select all entries from users where the email is equal to the email I'm getting here. And I get back a result. And in that result here, I should have an entry there if I do have a user with that email address. So actually we can name this user and then check if user. So if you got a user, then we can throw a new error that the email is already in use, or if you don't want to give away that information, you could say user creation failed, invalid credentials, stuff like that. Okay, so that's the first step. Checking whether we already have a user here. Next, I want to hash the password. So what I'm already doing. And with the hashed password, I want to insert the user. So I want to prepare a statement where I insert into the users table with email password, have my hashed password being inserted here. And the idea behind hashing the password is really just that if your database were to get compromised, then at least the passwords are not stored in plain text. Oh, there's, by the way, a good comment in the chat. That is true. For my env file to be picked up, I should also add the env file setting here to my scripts. Also then theoretically for the production version, though in production you would typically not use a env file. But for development, we need that. Okay, so with that, I'm inserting my user. I get back a result which has the last inserted row ID. And I then want to create a JSON web token here. So I'll import JWT from JSON web token. And then here I will create my token with JWT sign. Maybe store the user ID in there. We could also store the email or both. Sign it with my secret key here. And get back my, I'm already using JWT, getting back my token here, of course. So that's what we get back. Okay. We also might want to set expiration here to like 1 hour. Now, you also might want a refresh token so that users can stay logged in, because this token will expire after 1 hour and thereafter they'll have to re-authenticate. But here, to keep things a bit simpler, I'll just do it like this. And then finally here, we can return that token in the create user function so that we have a user stored in the database. And then here in the sign up route, we get back our token when we call create user. Any questions or comments? Yeah, thank you so much, Resnovops143. Happy to hear you're liking the MongoDB course. And thank you so much to all of you. Also, I definitely have not read all the messages, just too many. And coding and reading, I'm not so good at that. It's also my first ever coding stream, so there's that. When will I update the React course? I did entirely re-record it. Last year, the year before that, I updated it entirely for React 19 a few weeks ago. So this course is super up to date. It has React 19 in it. My React course is updated for React 19. Has brand new sections. All the other lectures, if necessary, have been updated. So yeah, it's all there. Okay, so we now created a user. We got a token. So we can send back a response where I also want to include that token. And I also want to wrap. Oh, I already have try catch, of course. I have try catch because create user may fail. We are throwing an error here if we have a user. So it may fail. And in that case, we send back an error response where we could say creating user failed. Invalid credentials or something like that. Now, theoretically, it could also fail because inserting in the database failed. So you might want to be a bit granular than that, but here for this first demo, it will do. Okay, so let's see if that works. Let's start that server. And of course, I don't need server.js. Of course, the imports here are not correct. We need .js here. That is needed if you're using ESM imports in Node.js. The AI did not add it, and I did not see it. So now the server is up and running. Now to test it, I got some extension. I don't know what the name is actually. REST client. I think it's this one. It's an extension that allows me to send requests simply by creating files that end with .http. And then in there, I can describe my request. In this case, that I want to send a post request to localhost 3000 sign up, that the content type will be application JSON. And then I can add the body just like this. So here I can use test@example.com and add a password like testers1, something like this. And then I can send a request here and get back my response here. So that's pretty convenient, and I'll try to move this over a bit so that you can see it a bit better. Why am I not using async code for DB interactions? Because you really don't need to with Better SQLite 3, the package I'm using. So this package I'm using, it's all synchronous. Doesn't need async, which is pretty convenient. Okay, so now I'm getting an error here. Create user failed, invalid credentials. Now that's a bit weird because I haven't created a user yet, so this email address shouldn't be taken. And of course, it also doesn't work if I use any other email address. So looks like we got some error in our code here. We're getting this error message here. So it must be in the create user function where things go wrong. Well, I guess first we can test whether we get this validation error response if we send invalid data. So let's, for example, send an empty email. Then I get back invalid email or password. So that works. And if I provide a valid email, but an invalid password, I get the same. So that is working, but creating the user fails. Not a fan of Postman. I do use Postman too. This just allows me to stay in the editor and it's very lightweight. So what's the problem here? What is the problem here? I am starting by checking if we have a user with the email address already. Let's do good old console log debugging. User already exists. Let's see if that's the problem. If I send the request, I don't get any log down there. So that does not seem to be the problem. Typo. I had password with 3 S's. So password didn't exist. So now with that fixed, that looks better. I got my token here. And we can use this token or a similar token in the future to authenticate requests when we want to get an image. Why not use VS Code debugging tool? To be honest, I'm just so used. It's the way you should do it. And everyone just does not use it because it's just so convenient and sometimes quicker. I don't know, to just use console log. It allows you to see the flow really nice and yeah. But yeah, sure. In theory, you should use the debugging tool. Okay, so we can create a user. That's working. Let's move on to logging in. So we're extracting the incoming request body, and then we're going to the login function, which is empty right now. And in this function, let's accept what we get suggested. Let's see if it is what we need. We're selecting a user for the given email, and then we check if we maybe did not get a user, or if for the user we get, the password is not in line with the password we stored, so it's not the same as the password we stored. In that case, we get an error, which looks fine to me. Looks good. Otherwise, we create a token. Same logic as up here. Therefore, we could also outsource this into a separate function, but here we're just using this code in 2 places. It's fine to duplicate it, I guess. So we're creating a token and we're returning it. So that actually looks good to me. And this, of course, is a part where AI was helpful, saved me some time. Let's give it a try. Let's add a login HTTP file, send a request to login, and let's try some incorrect credentials first. So this is an email address that doesn't exist. Oh God. Yeah, I get an error because, of course, it's not enough to write login here. I also need to do something in the login route. For example, send back a response if things worked. Though here it seemed like I got an error, but maybe the error also was that I did not send back a response here. So here I get back a token. Yeah, I get back a token. And then I want to send a response that includes that token. And here I want to say login failed. Please check your credentials or something like this. Okay. Let's give this another try. Okay. Makes sense that I get this error because if oh God, what am I doing? Because if my validation fails, I'm throwing an error and I'm catching this error here and I'm sending back that status, that error response. Now, to be honest, I'm not happy with sending back a 500 status code if validation failed. So there are various ways of solving this. I guess the cleanest way here is to validate in the route handler, because that's what I'm also doing for signup. However, it's not really validation. I'm reaching out to the database here. So actually what I'll do here is I'll create an error object, add a status code of 400 and throw that error object here. And then in app.js, when I catch the error, I can check if error status is equal to 400. And if that's the case, I want to return a status response, an error response with that status code that includes my error message. That makes sure that the proper status code is set. I'm not setting the status code here to 201 because 201, if you take a look at the HTTP status codes, I mean, ultimately you can set it to whatever you want, of course, but if you take a look at the success responses, 201 means created, which means a new resource was created. And of course, you could argue that the token is a resource, but I would say we're talking about resources that get stored on the server side, like users, posts, and so on. So in this case, I did not actually create a resource, so I'm fine with 200 here. Okay. So let us check this again. Now I get a proper error response for invalid credentials. Let's try a valid email address, but an invalid password. Also get this error. And if I now try a valid combination, I get back a token and login successful. So that works. Awesome. So we got these two routes, sign up and login. Now there is one last route we need, and that should be a route that gives us this AI generated image, which is of course the main thing of this project. Now for this route, I'll use replicate, as I said. So you could make this a get route. Here I'll actually make it a post route, I guess. Yeah, I'll make it a post route because we generate an image. Name it generate image, get a request, a response. And then in here, the idea is that I extract some data, which we will get from the frontend later. And I want to get the prompt, of course. I want to get also other things like the aspect ratio, if you want a JPEG or a PNG. So I'll extract some stuff from the request body. And what I will extract is the prompt here. And then also some options, let's say. And options should be stuff like aspect ratio, format, quality. Yeah, that looks good. So that's what I'll extract here. And then I want to call a function, which I'll add in a new file. Let's add a image.js file, sure. We could, of course, also like work with subfolders here. It's getting a bit crowded, but it's okay. Yeah, it's okay. I'll keep it all in one directory, but you could, of course, put it in a subfolder. So in here, I want to have a function generate image, which should do what the name implies. I want to get a prompt here and some options, and then I want to call this replicate API to generate an image there. So, replicate. I mentioned before that it's this Flux 1.1 Pro model which I want to use. And replicate is a really amazing service. I'm not getting sponsored or anything like that. It's just really great. They also give you some node.js code here for using this specific model, which is nice. And for example, we need to install this replicate package. And then we also must make sure that we make our API token, which you can get if you create an account and you pay for it because it's a paid model, that we make that available. So I'll start by, I don't need that terminal anymore. I'll start by installing this package, npm install replicate. And let's start again. And then I also want to go to my env file and add my token. Now I will do that off screen though, because I'm now going to use my actual API token, and I don't want to share that with all of you. I'm sorry. So what I will do real quick is go to that file on my other screen, to the env file, and open that there. And yeah, we can name it replicate API token. Okay, just double checking. It's not visible on the screen, that's good. So now I edited the env file, got my token in there. That's great. I can trust you. Yeah, sure. Maybe I can trust you, but there are 200 other people and I'm not sure about all of you. And it can get pretty expensive if you all start generating images on my bill. I don't want that. Thank you very much. So let's go back to generate image. Or actually, let's go back to replicate. Let's see what they tell us to do. So now that we installed the package, we can use it, we can import it and initialize replicate here with the replicate API token, which I'm storing in my env file. And then we can generate an image like this. This is actually, this needs to be async because we gotta wait here. And you see, we can pass a prompt, the aspect ratio, output format, and quality, and a couple of other things. And here, of course, I want to use my prompt. So I want to use my prompt here. For the aspect ratio, I want to use options aspect ratio, or if that should not be set, I'll actually use 1:1 as a default. For the format, I'll use options format, or if that should not be set, we can use PNG, or I guess also WebP, whatever you like. For the quality, I'll fall back to 80. Okay, get this. Then I sent the request, I used the pro model, and we're logging the output. So we should see something if we wire this up to our route. So in, where is my app.js file? In my app.js file, I can call create image. Can I not call it? Generate image is the name. I can call. Now I'm super paranoid that I accidentally moved to my env file. Generate image. And send a prompt and options. And for now, I'll hard code a prompt so that we can test this. Or actually, I don't need to. We can send a request without authentication. Or actually, even with authentication. We got everything in place. So yeah, let's do this. And we'll set this to be an async function here too. Await this. And then just send back some response here. Image generated successfully. And in the future, I'll of course send back the image. That's the goal here. So now we have this in place, and to test it, I'll start by not adding authentication, and I'll send a request to localhost generate image. That was my route. Yep. And I'll send some JSON content, and this is all wrong. Instead, I'll have a prompt here. A cat in a hat, why not? Thank you, GitHub. And I'll send my options, and there, let's say I'll set my format to PNG, and I don't set any other options. That should work. So with that, if I send a request, I'm getting an error. Expected double quoted property name in JSON. What is the problem here? What is my problem here? JSON at position 78. Okay, that's an internal error. Let's see. I am extracting. Oh, is it the nested object here? Let's try. What is if I don't set options? No, it's the same error. Yeah, it's a good call. Let's give AI the error. Shouldn't there be some overlay here? Normally there is an overlay. Copilot. I don't want to explain it. Oh well, let's explain it. And let's move the chat over here. I don't want that second window. I don't use the second sidebar. The error message indicates that there is a syntax error in your JSON input. Yeah, I'm aware that JSON needs double quotes. I'm just not sure where exactly I'm violating that. The comma after, oh, yep, that's it. AI is suggesting it to me and I accepted it. So let's restart the server. Oh God, I broke the extension. Oh, no, it just took a while. Now I generated a bunch of images. Okay, image generated successfully. Thank you so much, that worked. If you want to buy my React book, you can also go to, gotta advertise my book here. You can also go to my website, which I will redo soon, by the way, and there to book. There also are some special offers here, depending on how many books you order. But even if you just buy one, you get some nice bonus content. Yeah. Okay, so we fixed this error. Thank you so much for the help. It was the trailing comma. So with that, we can now generate images. Now that we have that, we need to send the image back with the response to the client. So what I need to do in generate image is extract the image. Now I logged the output here, and you see it is a readable stream. However, I played around with that before I started this live stream, and I was not able to use it with all the Node Stream API. I was not able to pipe it into a response or anything like that. I'm not sure if it's like a custom implementation of a readable stream by Replicate, by their SDK here, but it also doesn't matter because using the result, thankfully, isn't too tricky. once you know how it works, I guess. So what output actually is it's an object that has a bunch of streams inside of it. Last time I used it, at least, that was the case. So we can get our output stream here by accessing output and then the first item here. Now let's validate this and log it to the console. Good old logging. And let's again generate an image here. This time I'll wait so that I don't generate 10 of them. Okay, that worked. And I got undefined. Oh, right, because I used a different model in preparation. I used flux-schnell. Let's see if that has the behavior I just described. It's also a Flux model, but it's a bit quicker than the Pro model, which is the reason why I used it. Yeah, so now I actually get back a bunch of streams and I extract one. Before, with the Pro model, we get just one stream. Now it's multiple streams because you could generate multiple images with this model at the same time. We're just generating one, so that's the stream I'm extracting. Nonetheless, it was a stream I was not able to pipe into the response. So what we can do here is we can create a blob, not a block, a blob, by awaiting output stream blob. So these objects that are generated by the replicate SDK have a blob method, which you can call, which gives you a blob. That's in the end just an object full of binary data, you could say. Now, sending this blob with the response did not work for me. I was not able to get this to work. However, what you can do here is you can create a buffer by calling the array buffer method on that blob. That turns it into another object that consists of binary data in the end. And now this is an array buffer, and we can send such a buffer with the response. However, there's one last transformation that needs to be done. That is, I need to use Node's buffer object to translate the specific array buffer in a more generic buffer, I guess. And that's now the thing that I can send back with my response here. So what I'll do is I'll return an object with that image, so with that buffer, which is in the end just the bits and bytes we got back. It's the image just stored in an object which we can send back with a response. And I'll also add a format key to the object I'm returning in this function here. And that format key will be extracted from the blob. That is just a type, so that I know whether I have like a JPEG or a JPEG or a PNG or anything else here. That's the thing I'm doing. What about the weather conditions now in Bavaria? It's winter, but it's okay. Today it did not snow. That's great. Okay, so now I requested the image, got back a stream of data, which I translated or which I transformed to such a blob object, which I needed to get this buffer, which is now ultimately the data package I can send back with my response here. So now here in my route handler, I'm getting that image and I'm getting that format. And now I can send back a response with that data. So I can go to my response, and first I want to set the type equal to my format here. So basically that I have this information in here. And then I'll send back not this object here. I won't send back JSON data here. Instead, I'll send back the image. So this buffer thing. Yeah. Let's see whether this works. This type is not a function. What's the problem? Response type. Should actually work. Oh, yeah, it is a function I need to call. Like this. It's not a property. So let's try again. Okay, we got a cat in a hat. We got this working. So now there's just one, whoa, that's scary. Now there's just one thing missing on my backend here, on this simple backend, which already took us some time, which is why I went with a simple backend. And that is that I, of course, want to enforce authentication, because right now anyone can send a request here, and I don't want that. So I want to protect this route. So in my auth.js file, I'll export a function, enforce auth, or something like this. That's the name I'll choose here. And in this function here, in enforce auth, I expect to get a request object and also a response and the next function, so that I can use this as a middleware in Express.js. And then in there, I want to check whether I have my authentication header, and if I do have it, if it contains a valid token. So I'll start by using GitHub Copilot, I guess, by extracting my authorization header from the incoming request. I want to check if there is no header, and if there is no header, I send back a 401 response, which makes sense. Could also say unauthenticated here. Then I got my token by splitting that auth header, because we typically got something like Bera, and then I got my token. So I split this so that I just get the token by using the second element here after splitting this into an array of 2 elements. So that will give me my token. And then I try verifying that token. And yeah, exactly. That should throw an error if it's an invalid token, in which case we return an error response saying unauthenticated. Otherwise, we call next so that the request can move on to the next middleware in line. So back in app.js, here for generate image, we can add this middleware here before calling the final middleware function that will generate the image by adding it here to the argument list. So now this middleware will be executed for every request, every post request that reaches generate image, and will then automatically check if there is a valid token in there. And if not, we should send back an error response. So if I now try sending this request here again without a token, I should get an error, though I did not save my files. So now that I did save my files, I do get an unauthorized error. So that's looking good. To work around that error, we need to add another header, the authorization header, and set Bera to a valid token. So we need a valid token, which we can get by logging in, by sending a request to the login route. So that's what I'll do. Grab my token here, like this, go back to gen image, insert the token here, send the request, and I get my cat. So that seems to work. Now, obviously, you could absolutely improve the code here. It is fairly simple code. Definitely could be improved, but it does the job here. Shouldn't a wrong token be 403 forbidden? That is a good point. That would be better, actually, if you differentiate between no token and a wrong token, because that's not the same thing. A wrong token means you have a token, but you are not authorized because it's invalid. Here, I'll just keep it as is, because we got a whole frontend to build, and yeah, that will also take some time. But as mentioned, you could refine this backend. Definitely. Absolutely. Okay. So we got that. Now with that, I think we're ready to start working on the frontend, but first I'll drink something. Can we post the whole code into Copilot chat to let it optimize the code? Yeah, we could definitely try that. We could definitely try that. I just want to move on here. I just want to move on because we got the whole front end to build. Yeah, that's that. What I can do though is in git ignore, I'll add my db files. Actually also the app db, because I don't want to commit those to my repo. The database is created anyways when the app starts, and therefore this should not be part of my repo. Because with that, I'll keep my backend server running here, but I will now create another commit. And I'll start working on that frontend. So there we can run npm run dev. Since it's a Vite application, I just need to install my dependencies there, of course. I haven't done that yet. Please add expiration to tokens just for teaching. I have added expiration to tokens. I have not added the logic for refreshing them, I will admit. That would take this application to an entirely new level. It would take quite a lot of time if we were to add this. So here, for the sake of not spending the next 5 hours on this application, I'll keep the backend a bit simpler. Okay, so now we can run npm run dev to start the development server. And finally, we can visit localhost 5173 to see our standard Vite React app here. Awesome. Is this course available on YouTube and Udemy? No, this is just a fun project I'm doing right now. This has nothing to do with Udemy. I will put the recording of this session on YouTube thereafter. That I will do. Am I going to use Tailwind? Yes, I will. Why use Vite and not create React app? Create React app is kind of deprecated. I'm not sure if it's officially deprecated, to be honest. I mean, it says set up a modern React app somewhere here, but actually it's not actively developed, not too actively developed anymore. And the consensus seems to be that we're all using Vite now. However, you can, of course, create your React apps in any way you want. Feierabend beer afterwards? Definitely. Definitely. I have to drive home first, though, so not here. But yeah, definitely. Yeah, CRA is abandonware, right. Create a full stack web development course. I actually have like a super large web development bootcamp. It's just not super big on Udemy because I was not the first one to create one there, but I have a course with everything for getting started with web development on Udemy, if you want that. Okay, let's start working on the front end. I think I will not try creating it all with GitHub Copilot edits again, but we will keep on using AI, of course. So I want to use Tailwind. So therefore, I'll do what I'll always do. If I want to use Tailwind in a Vite project, I search for Tailwind Vite to get to this page on the official docs. And then there, I don't need to create my project, but I need to run these commands here to install Tailwind CSS and a couple of other dependencies and run the init command. So I'll copy that and stop the Vite server, run these commands. Then I'll copy that config here And by the way, of course, we could also try building this front end with something like Bolt. We could be using Cursor instead of VS Code and GitHub Copilot. We could try the new GitHub workspaces, the Copilot workspaces. We could do all these things. Here, I'll just do it by hand with some AI support. Because I have a pretty good idea of the code I want to write, so I don't want to control an LLM to spit out what I want, and I don't want a different result here for this demo, so I'll do it myself. I also don't want to end up in any infinite error loops which I have to fix or anything annoying like this. Okay, so now let's replace the content in index CSS here with that. And we're done. So now my styling broke, of course. I can get rid of the app CSS file. Can also get rid of the assets folder, don't need that. And here I'll clean up this app component, get rid of all that code in there, and we'll start from scratch. Do you consider creating a Tailwind course? Considered it. Tailwind 4 seems to be coming out next week, so that could be a good opportunity. But I'll also be honest, like, for one, I feel like with Tailwind, the docs are a pretty great place to learn almost everything there is to learn. Though I would also think that many people only use like 10% of what Tailwind has to offer. And I also probably only use like 11%. But I'm also not sure. A Tailwind course could be interesting, but I fear not enough people would be interested in it. So given the fact that I have so many projects, course updates, new courses, other projects, and I have to focus, Tailwind is probably not what I'll work on, unfortunately. Things can always change though. Okay, so here in the app component, I want to have, I'll keep it fairly simple all here. I want to have a div, which in the end should include a header component, which doesn't exist yet, which will basically be the same all the time. And then below that, I have my main section, and in there, I show either my auth form or the image generation form. Now we could add React Router and have different routes, but since I really only have these two forms, I'll switch between them with use state. Now I'll add a class here to my surrounding div and set a nice dark background color. And I could also do that in the index.html file. I'll just do it here. And set a minimum height of taking the full available screen height and padding to top and bottom on the y-axis of 8, which is, I guess, 2 rem. Yeah. Okay, so that's that. I'll also add a components folder and in there a header JSX file, and we need JSX as a file extension when working with Vite. And in there, I'll add my header component function, which I'll export as a default. And of course, you can also export it in different ways. I'll just do it like this. And in there, I'll export a header component, a header element, I mean, where I want to center my text and use some white text since I'll have a dark background. Add my h1 tag here where I say reactlicate, because it's React and replicate, image generator. And we can make this bold and a bit bigger, and I'll use a mono font. We could also customize this, by the way, and the Tailwind docs are, of course, okay, I closed them, are, of course, a great way of learning more about that, how you can use your own custom fonts. The docs are really amazing. Here, I'll just use the default. Now I need to bring in my header from the header component file. And then below that, I want to have a form which either allows users to log in or to generate images. And actually, I'll build separate components for that. So in here, I guess I'll just have some margin to the top to have some spacing between the header and the main content. And then in here, I have auth or image gen. Yeah, so here it is. Now my header is not there though. Header is not defined. I guess you can't see that well though because the chat is in front of it. So let me pull that over. Okay, header is not defined. I am importing my header from components header though. I have it here. What's the issue? Okay, so I got rid of that error. Still not seeing it though. Is it here? No, it's not in the DOM. Yeah, it helps if you return the JSX code, of course, in the component. Now it's there. Perfect. Yeah, return it, right. It's always like the small things like that. Why am I watching this after a full day of developing? Well, I'm doing this after a full day of developing, so I guess you get the good part. Why is there no return function in the header file? Because I'm stupid. That's the problem. But now it's working. Okay. So we get that. Now I will add a auth or auth form JSX file, which should do what the name implies. It should contain that auth form. And it should also, of course, submit. No, I think I'll submit I'll send the request somewhere else, but I want to have the form in there. So I'll have my form, my component auth form, and I'll export that here, auth form. And now I'll return my JSX code so that I don't forget it again. And in here, I, in the end, want to have that form. And I think I'll reuse that form because I'll also have an image generation form later. So I'll add a new component, form. What are you suggesting? Yeah, sure. Don't really need it, but not return, export default. But I need a form element, so yeah. And I'm doing this because I'll use the same styles for both this auth form and also for the image generation form later on. And here I want to have like a dark but not as dark background, some padding, maybe some rounded corners, and I'll use flexbox for positioning the input elements in the form later. Okay. And I want to use this as a wrapper, so I should accept the children like this. Considering server-side functions for sending the requests. Well, since this is a Vite React project, implementing server actions is not trivial because you still basically need a framework that supports them. And I'm using my own decoupled backend here, not Next.js. So I will not be using server actions here, but maybe we can rebuild this with Next.js in the future, and then we could also use server actions, of course. Don't you feel like React breaks the rule of separation of concerns if the files contains the DOM and code, unlike Angular, where there are two different files? Well, you can definitely argue that there is no separation of concerns here. The question is if you always need that separation, or if it's not sometimes simpler if you have related things close together, which is what you have with React. I guess that's also why Tailwind is so popular, because with Tailwind, you slap your styles directly onto your HTML code, and you don't, or JSX, and you don't have to switch between CSS files and HTML, and that is convenient. And of course, you don't have to know CSS, which is maybe the bigger reason. But yeah, it is a valid argument that it's no separation of concerns, but convenience can also be interesting. Good. So I got my form. Oh, stupid ESLint. I don't want to do linting here. And then I'll use my form like this in auth form. And in there, I now want to have a bunch of paragraphs where my paragraphs have a label and an input, of course. And I'll repeat that for the password. And then below that, I want to have a button. Type submit, sure, is the default. We don't need that, which submits this. I also want to have a button, let's say below that, or actually maybe in the same paragraph, but I'll make sure that it is displayed below later, where I allow users to switch between sign up and login mode, because I want to use one form for both. So actually what we need here is some state. We need some state, import use state from React, where we switch between modes. So we could say the default is login mode, and we can switch between login and sign up. And there are, of course, different ways of implementing this. Here, I'll just use a simple state. So my auth mode and my set auth mode function here. And then I have my handle switch auth mode event handler here. And in there, I'll set my auth mode with this function form, since I'm updating my state based on the previous state. And if my auth mode was login, I'm switching to sign up, and vice versa. And of course, you could alternatively also use a state named is login and use a Boolean. Here I'm just using a string because I think that might be a bit more readable, whatever. Here on the button, I'll add my onClick handler and point to the handle switch auth mode function. And then for the caption, that of course depends on which mode we are in. So if mode is login, the button should allow us to switch to signing up. So it should say something like create a new user. If we are in sign up mode, we could say I already have an account, log in instead, or something like that. So that should allow us to switch modes. And we can try this. I'll render my auth form component in my app component, and it will be ugly. Mode is not defined. Sure, because I guess I named this auth mode, not mode. So now we can try this. And if I click this second button here, it submits the form because it should be type button, of course. Since we're in a form, every button by default will submit the form, which will reload the page. I don't want it. So after changing this, this allows us to switch. So that's great. Could you please repeat the last part for users auth mode? So the idea here is that I have a state in my component that stores a string. And the string is simply login or sign up, because I define it to be login or sign up. And then I have a function which updates the state. And I take a look at the old state. And if the state was login, I change it to sign up. If it was sign up, I change it to login. We could also use like a ternary expression here, by the way. But this is what AI gave me, so this is what I'll use. And then I connected this function to this button, which must not submit the form, because I don't want to submit the form. I don't want to send a request here. I just want to update my state. And then I update a caption based on the mode we're currently in. And if we are in login mode, the button should say create a new user, because that would be the mode we switch to if we were to click the button. Yeah, we could use tan-stack query. That's right. I think I'll just send fetch requests myself though, because I won't have any complex caching needs or anything like this here. We actually also won't have any GET requests here. And I know you can also use 10-stack query for post, but that should be fine. Okay, so we get that. Of course, this is still pretty ugly here. So we should clean this up. To clean it up, I'll start by adding some classes here to these paragraphs, which wrap my labels and inputs. And since I'll have multiple of those, also in another form, I'll add yet another component. Input container could be the name. And I'll export that here. And in there, I'll return a paragraph and I'll get my children props. And then here, I just want to have a class name where I use flexbox with flex column to render items above each other. And then here I can use my input container and I'll have the same styles be applied to all the, whoops, I messed something up there. I will the same styles have applied to all these inputs. I also only need it here. Okay. Now for this paragraph down here, I'll actually also use flex and flex call with a gap because I want these buttons to sit on top of each other. But I also will add a margin to the top here, so that looks a bit better. And I also want to make sure that this form isn't as big. And for this, I actually want to make this form component configurable so that I can pass my own CSS classes into it and merge them with the CSS classes I apply here, because that will allow me to have some base classes, which are always used for all forms I'm using in my application, but I can still fine-tune the forms to look a bit different or have a bit of a different behavior in the different places I use them. And to do that merging of classes with Tailwind, there's a really useful package which I like to use for that. And that's the Tailwind merge package, which does what the name implies. It merges Tailwind classes. And it helps you with building reusable, configurable components. So I'll import the what is it called? Is it called it's a named import, the Tailwind merge function from Tailwind merge in my form component. So in that reusable form component, and then I'll set class name to a dynamic value and wrap this here with Tailwind merge like this. And now I can also accept and extract a class name prop and also pass that to Tailwind merge. And now if I were to set this class name prop, if I were to pass my own class names into my form component, those class names would get merged with the existing class names and would, for example, overwrite them if I have clashes. And that in turn now allows me to go here and add some classes which I only want to apply to this form on this page. In this case, I want to have a max width of 25 rem. And that's how you can set a specific value with Tailwind. If you don't want to use one of those pre-built classes, that is how you can set a very specific value if you need to. And MX auto to center it. So it already looks nicer. Still not great, but nicer. Now, to make it look better, I also want to style my labels and inputs. And again, these are elements and styles I will reuse, so I'll create a separate component. But first, I'll drink something. Tailwind is nice for some cases, but it would be great if you could consider creating a new course using Radix UI. Yeah, I will also say that, of course, we could also use something like shadcn or any other component library. For one, I want to keep it simple, but at the same time also show you how to build stuff on your own. So that's why I went for custom components with Tailwind. But of course, you can also use a component library. And I will not make it responsive here because, again, trying to keep it simple whilst still adding all the functionality that should be in there. But there is an endless amount of packages and things you could use, of course. So here I'll add my label component function. And this one I actually did already prepare. So I'll paste it in. And I'm again using Tailwind merge. And I'm extracting a couple of props here. And I'm returning a label. And I make the HTML4 prop configurable, because different labels will, of course, refer to different inputs. I implemented the class name in the same way I just explained it for the form, so that I have a base class name that could be configured if needed, so that could be configured from outside. And I get the children prop and wrap that with my label. That's all I do here. In addition, I'll add an input.jsx file and add an input function in there. And of course, also export this. And here again, the idea is to have a configurable, reusable, pre-styled input component. I also want to be able to render a text area instead of an input here. So I will actually accept that isTextArea prop to find out whether a text area or an input should be returned. I will get a class name and any other props with this REST parameter syntax here that might be passed to this component. Because of course inputs are configurable in a broad variety of ways. You can set different types. You have a lot of attributes and props in the end you can set. So that's why I'm gathering all these props. And then I'll do what it suggests to me here. I'll add a component constant with a capital character, because I'll use this as a JSX element, because in there I store either text area or input, which are both valid built-in elements. And I set that based on the isTextArea prop. Then I have my class name here. However, for merging, I'll again use Tailwind merge. So just as before, Tailwind merge. I'll wrap this, pass my class name here, and not use string interpolation. Yeah, and I spread all my props, which I gathered here, onto this component so that I can configure it in any way needed. Will I release the recording? Yes. I hope that OBS records this. I have configured it to do so, and I will upload this to YouTube once this is done. Okay, so now I got a label, I got an input. Finally now, I can use that here. So I will use my own label component now, and of course add the import. Do that here for both email and password, and use my own input, the input component. Also import that. And use that for both inputs. And this gives me this look, which is not too bad. Now we need to work on those buttons, of course. So for those buttons, I want to give my submit button a styling that makes it stand out, because that, of course, is the primary button. And I'll use a background of sky 400, which is like a bluish color. Give it a black text for a nice contrast. Vertical padding of 2 here. And what else did I did write down which style I wanted to use here, because I don't want to bore you with figuring out which Tailwind styles look good 20 minutes long. So I'll give it rounded corners and add some hover styles here as well, so that when we hover this button, I set the background to BG Sky 500. And if it should be disabled, I'll set the cursor to not allowed. And if it's disabled, I'll set the background to stone 400. And I know this is really hard to read for you now. Disabled text stone 600. So it's just a bunch of Tailwind classes here. But with that, I got this button. The text should be black though. Why is the text not black? Text black. It says it's black here, but it clearly isn't. Okay. This is a server problem. Restarting. No, it does not change it. Why is this not black? Check an index CSS file. Yeah, the indexed CSS file is configured the way it should be for Tailwind, so that's fine. No controlled inputs. Well, in the end, I just built my own input wrapper component here. I'm not trying to like manage state in there or do anything like that. I built it only for styling purposes in the end. I'm not sure why this text is white though. Does not make too much sense for me. It's also not too important though. Not ideal, but I don't care enough here to debug this, since it looks okay. Yeah, maybe browser cache. Whoops, did not want to do that. Let's ignore it. It's good like this. We can switch the mode. Of course, we got no clear indicator other than this text, but it's good enough for that. Well, actually, we could change the caption of this button here. We could check if auth mode is login, and in that case, say login or sign up. That makes it a bit clearer what we're doing. Yeah, I like that. Okay. So with that, finally, we get the auth form finished. Now we need to send a request to the backend, create a user or log in, get back our token, store that token on the front end, and of course update the UI if we did log in successfully, so that then we can show that form, which we'll use to generate an image later on. Now, this is a simple app. We could simply store that authentication status here in the app component. However, I will use the context API here, because why not? So in there, I'll add an auth context.js file and then import create context from react, create my auth context here. And this is actually not what I need here for my context. Instead, I need a token field, which initially is null. And I need a sign-up function, which will receive an email and a password, and which will then send the request and get that token. A login function, which does the same in the end, and a logout function, which clears the locally stored token. So, and I'll also export that context. Though actually no, I'll not export it. I'll export a function use auth context, so my own hook here, my own custom hook, in which I want to consume this context. And I'm doing it like this because then I can also check whether it's maybe used in a place where it's not available yet. For that, I'll use the use hook, and for that we need React 19, which this project is not using. So actually, I'll stop the development server and install React at latest and React DOM at latest. I did not know that Vite is still not creating React 19 projects by default. Okay, so that's that. So with that, we can use the use hook. The use hook which is introduced by React 19, which you can use with suspense, but which you can also use to consume context. So that gives us the auth context. And then I can check if not auth context, and I can throw an error and otherwise return it. And this gives me a hook which I can use to safely access this context. And if I try to use it somewhere in my app where this is undefined, I get a clear error that tells me what to do. So it's a little convenience in the end. Okay. Now, next, I want to export a function, auth context provider, which uses my auth context and wraps it around the children. Though with React 19, we don't need the provider property anymore. We can just wrap the auth context itself as a component. And it's in this auth context provider component here where I want to manage my token and the authentication status therefore. So it's in here where I'll now use state. We could also use reducer, but it's a really simple state. So I'll use state to manage my auth token, or just token here. And initially that's undefined because initially I got no token here, let's say. Soon or later, I will actually take a look and see if we stored a token so that we keep a user logged in even if the page is reloaded, but initially I'll just have this undefined. Okay, next I need a signup function and I need a login function. And I also need a logout function. And then I can create my context value, and here GitHub Copilot is helping me great, and construct my context value with the token that's managed with use state and with those functions, so that in other places of the app where I'm reaching out to that context, I can call these functions and I can access that token. So then here I'll set my value equal to context value. If I could type like this. Of course, these functions don't do anything yet, but that will come soon. The use context hook is, by the way, not deprecated. You can still use it. Maybe it will be deprecated in the future. But right now you can either use context or the use hook. And I would imagine that the use context hook will stay around for a long time to come. Okay, so now let's work on that sign up logic here. Let's see what GitHub Copilot suggests to me. And that's, by the way, also I think the thing I mentioned at the very beginning of this stream, which is a couple of hours ago. So if you are part of this stream since then, awesome. I am. You're too. You're amazing. So what I mentioned at the beginning of the stream is that when you get used to GitHub Copilot, I found myself just waiting for auto completions, and it was the same with Cursor, for example. And that is, of course, great. It can make you more efficient. But if you're waiting for completions for stuff where you know what you want, I didn't measure it, but I might not even be that much faster just by then checking the code compared to if I would have written the code right from the start myself. Not sure what is faster. It's definitely not faster if you talk as I'm doing, but yeah. Okay, so what it's suggesting to me here is that I send my request. That's the wrong port, should be 3000. Sign up, it's a method, it's a post request, JSON data with the email and password. And then here we check if the response is not okay, in which case we throw an error. Sign up failed. We could also, in that case, actually here we could, I don't want to use it. I want to make a async function here, which of course, to be fair, GitHub Copilot didn't know, but yeah, I want to do that. And await my response here, actually like this. And yeah, we can try this. And that's always the annoying part with catch, that you have like the try block, which you need to wrap around your request logic like this, because the request could fail. But then after awaiting it, and when I have the response, I also want to throw my own error if the response is an error response, because if you get back a 400 or 500 response, it will not throw an error. Instead, it will be a valid response with an error code. But I want to throw an error in that case, which is why I'm doing it myself here. However, I also want to get the response data here, either way, no matter if it's an error response or a valid response, because either way, there will be response data. And I want to use that response data message if there is any, and otherwise say something went wrong, or in this case, creating a user failed. Check your credentials or try later. Of course, that's not very specific, but it will do for this demo here. Okay, so now I got my response data. If the response fails, I throw an error. Otherwise, if we make it past this if check, we know that we got a success response. So in that case, I know that my response should include a token, so I will set my token state and set it to that token I received. Now, if I got an error here, I of course want to make how do I want to do that? So I think I want to throw an error here too. I'll not try catch here. I'll try catch in the component that calls the sign up function, I think. Because that's where I also want to show the error message, because that will be my auth form. I think that makes more sense. Okay, let's give this a try. So I have the sign up function. I'm setting this to my context value. I'm making it available. Now I need to wrap my app component here with the auth context provider component I just worked on, so that the context is available there. And then in auth form, we need to add a new function, handle submit, or since I'm using React 19, we can actually use a action function if we want to. So let's do that. Let's name it submit action. We can set it like this. However, for this to work, we must make sure that our own custom form component accepts an action prop and sets that to the action prop of the built-in form component. Otherwise, this won't work. Okay, lots of new messages. Doesn't that create an infinite loop? What you mean? We'll see. I don't think I have an infinite loop in there, but we'll see. Is there any way of downloading content on Udemy? So the way it works on Udemy is I actually have turned on downloading for all my lectures in all my courses. There's a little switch I can set on a per lecture basis, and I have set this to on for all lectures in all my courses forever. However, I think Udemy disabled this a couple of years ago, or it disabled this for some kinds of accounts, for business accounts, maybe also for all accounts. So this is outside of my control. I have enabled it, but it's possible that Udemy does not allow downloading anymore. I'm not sure about this. On our own website, Academy Pro, you can download everything. Will you add this session here to Udemy? No, that's not the plan, but I will make the recording available on YouTube, assuming that OBS does not mess up the recording. Downloading is possible for mobile and tablet apps. Yeah, maybe Udemy did this to make it a bit harder to steal the MP4 files. Yeah, but as I said, that is totally outside of my control for Udemy. And Udemy would definitely not allow me to distribute links to the MP4 files. And I also would not want to do that because, to be very honest, it would only be a matter of minutes until some student would share it on some pirate website or anywhere. Okay, so now, where was I? I built the context with the sign-up function. Yeah. Now in auth form, we can get the auth context by using our custom use auth context hook. And then here in the submit action, we can use auth context and call signup. Now, since I'm using form actions, the submit action will automatically receive the form data. That's the nice thing about actions, that React will make sure that I get the data. However, you must make sure that you assign name properties to your inputs. So I need to do that for the email and for the password. You must set names. I will also use the use action state hook provided by React. Use action state, which allows me to which allows me in the end to show a pending state, to find out whether the form is currently being submitted or not and update the UI accordingly. This gives me back an array with 3 elements where I don't need the first element, and that's how you can skip it. You just don't assign a name when using array destructuring as I'm doing it. The second element will be an updated action because your action will be wrapped by React here. And then the last element is pending proper value. The names, of course, are up to you, but that will be a Boolean. That's true if the action is currently underway, if the form is being submitted and something's happening, or false otherwise. So now it's this action, the wrapped action, so to say, that should be used here for the form. My action, the submit action, is actually passed to use action state, not form data. That was wrong. And I get form data here in submit action. However, if you pass your form action to use action state, your form data will actually be the second argument. The first argument will be the previous form state if you need that. But here I don't need it, so I'll just skip it like this. It's a bit more complex, but you get used to it quickly. Now I'll use this is pending state here to actually disable my buttons if the form is currently being submitted. So I'll set the disabled prop on both buttons equal to is pending, so that if is pending is true, if the form is being submitted, I disable them. Is pending. That should hopefully do the trick. And I guess we can also change the caption of this sign up or login button. We can check if we're not in a pending state and the auth mode, then we show the regular captions. However, if is pending is true, then I'll set the caption to submitting, so that we give the user some feedback that something's happening. Now back in the actual submit action here, I want to call sign up, that is correct, on my auth context. Now, sign up, of course, will be a function that takes an email and a password, and it's async, so it returns a promise. So we should forward that email and password, and we can get that from the form data. So we can get the email by using form data get email, and the name I'm using here, the identifier I'm using here, is the name I assigned down here. So that must be the same. And the same is true for the password, of course. So here I assigned a name of password, and that's why it's password up here. Okay. Now I want to check if my auth mode actually is sign up, because only if we are in that mode, only then I want to call the sign up function. And I'll pass my email and password to this. Then I'll make this async. Form actions can be async so that I can await this. And yeah, I guess we can give this a try. Now, how can we tell whether it worked though? Well, in auth context, I'm setting my token to the received token if that sign-up process worked. I'm getting back an error if I, for example, try to create a user with an email that already exists. So we should definitely handle that potential error here. So I will actually wrap this here with try catch to catch that error that we might be getting. And I'll add another state here in my auth form, an error state, so that we can update the UI if we get an error. Initially, it's undefined, but if we catch an error here, I'll set my state to, yeah, I got an error object with a message, so I'll set it to error.message. By the way, whenever I submit the form, I'll reset the error to null to clear any errors I might have. Now to show the error, we can go maybe below the inputs, above the buttons, check if we have an error, and if that's the case, add a paragraph where we output that error, which is in this case then just a string. We could give this a class name of text red 300 and some margin to the top. Okay. Failed to parse import auth context. Yeah, that should be a JSX file because I have JSX code in there. Looks like I also got another error. Am I trying to import a .js file now? Should not be the case. Okay, restarting the server helped. Okay, so let's try creating an account with a user that already exists. I created this email address way earlier when we worked on the backend. The backend server is still up and running, by the way. Now, if I switch to sign up mode and I click sign up, I get a course error, but at least displaying the error message works. That's good. And I get a course error because I totally forgot when setting up the backend that we of course need to set the course headers to allow our decoupled frontend to communicate with that backend. We did not need that when using a standalone REST client like the extension I used, but for a frontend that runs in the browser wants these course headers to be set. So I'll do that. I'll add a middleware here on the backend. And in here, I want to set those headers, and thankfully GitHub Copilot also already knows which kind of middleware I likely want to add. So it suggests these headers, and these are the headers I need. Though I don't need get or delete requests, we won't have those. Yeah, but with that, and that's saved, that should hopefully work. Let's try it again. Of course, the error message is not too meaningful here, but yeah. Okay, creating a user failed. That is what I expected because that email address already existed. Now let me try an email address that does not exist yet and a valid password. And I think that looks better. The error message is gone. Now we don't update the UI yet because we don't have any logic for that yet, but it is a step in the right direction. So, hey Max, will you provide the code of this project for reviewing after we are done? Yes, I do plan to make that available, yeah. Maybe not immediately today, but tomorrow, yeah. Why not just install course as a dependency? Yeah, sure, I could do that, but on the other hand, it's just that, what I need here. So yeah, you can install an extra library, nothing wrong with that, but I only need these headers here, so yeah, I can also quickly add them here. Especially with AI, it was definitely quicker than installing and using a package, I guess. Why was there a 400 in the console? I think that was from before. And now I click the button again, but this was from before when I had an invalid credentials. Because on the back end, if I have invalid credentials, I sent back a request with status code 400. That's the reason. Okay, so now with that, we're signing up. That seems to work. Now let's add log in, and then let's make sure that we update the UI and that we then also add log out, of course. So for logging in, we need to work on this login function, which also should be async. And I can copy this code because it is mostly the same. I want to send a request to /login, of course. That's an important change. But it's a post request. I got an email and password. I got the same error handling. Here I'll say logging in failed. Check your credentials or try later. And again, you could definitely improve the app. You could improve the error handling, and that might be something we do in a future session, or you do with the code I provided, or both. But here, to keep it simple, make some progress, I'll just leave it like this. Set the token to the token I got back. And I think that should be it. By the way, I really feel that I've been talking for 3 hours, that I've been like concentrating like hell. So if I make really stupid mistakes here, please bear with me. This is really draining. It's also fun, but it's really draining. Would you advise me to build a custom e-commerce with custom use case with Shopify, or build from scratch? Or do you have other alternatives? So if you want to build an e-commerce site, like a real e-commerce site, if you like have like a business where you need one, I would definitely go for Shopify. Maybe for alternatives, but I only know Shopify, that it's really great, because building that from scratch is a huge project. Might be a nice project, a nice side project, a simplified Shopify, a simplified e-commerce project might be a nice side project. But if you're serious, if you need that for your business, I would definitely go for an existing solution. Did you plan to stream Angular project with latest feature? I might also stream some Angular in the future. Sure. Which packages could handle course? I think the package name is really just course. Last update 2018. To be honest, I rarely use this one, but it's part of the Express.js repo, so it has seen some updates. What? But yeah, the course package would be the package I would normally use if I were to use a package for that. How about Nest.js? Yeah, I answered this before. Nest.js is amazing, but here I went for a pretty simple Node.express backend. You could always use any technologies, but you have to use something. And Nest.js is a bit more overhead, a bit more boilerplate, and I wanted something lean here. Is this stream more draining than recording tutorials? Definitely, because when I record tutorials, I can take a break. I could take one here too, I know, but you can take like half an hour of a break. And it would probably not be that interesting to see nothing here for half an hour. But yeah, it's definitely more draining. But also way more fun, to be honest, honestly. Okay, so we got the auth context file, we got login here. Let's simply try if it works. I don't know, let's simply try if it works. Let's go back to auth form. And then here, if auth mode is not sign up, it must be login here. So let's call the login function. Let's send the email and password to it. And let's see whether that works. Now, we can also already make sure that we update the UI if it works. And for that, I'll go to app.js. And here I want to swap auth form for the other content, for the actual form that allows us to generate an image in the future if authentication succeeded. Now, to do that, to access the context, I actually need to move the context up a level into my main JSX file. So I'll use my auth context provider here and wrap it around the entire app component. so that in the app component, I can use that context, because for that, it must be on a higher level. That then allows me to use my use auth context hook here, get access to the auth context. Actually, we can also use object destructuring here, and get my token from my auth context. Like this. And then I can use this token to either render the auth form if we don't have a token. So if we don't have a token, I render the auth form. Otherwise, I render the form we use, or I render the component where we will handle the image generation. So for that, I'll add a new image generation JSX file. Function image generation. Okay, I did not mean to accept this. For now, I'll just output a div here where I'll say image gen. And then in the app component, it's this image generation component, which currently is only a dummy component, of course, which I want to render if we have a token. And we should have a token if authentication succeeded, because in the auth context, we're setting that token. Okay. Max, have you already planned to stream regularly? Yeah, definitely. I want to stream more often. Not sure how often yet, but it's fun. Definitely would love to do that. So strange to see React code again after several months of working with Next.js and no TypeScript. Well, I guess you see some React code in Next.js too, but I get what you mean. Vanilla React code, yeah. But I really like, I like going back to like vanilla apps like this with a plain backend, plain frontend. Really also practice these skills, and especially for this first stream, I wanted to have something relatively simple because I can already tell this is taking longer than I expected. So good thing I did not go for something more complex. Why not TSX? Why not TypeScript? Yeah, because this is complex enough, takes up enough time. If I were to add TypeScript too, you run into some type errors here and there. You have to define the types. I wanted to keep it lean here because I was not sure how long that will take, and it's taking some time. So future projects, which I might split across multiple sessions, can of course also be a bit more complex. Okay, so let's try logging in. Let's try a valid combination, or let's try invalid one first. Got an error. That's good. By the way, the form is cleared because I'm using form actions. That is how they work. If you don't want that, you would have to handle submission on your own as you did it prior to React 19. So now let's try a valid combination, and we see image gen. So that seems to work. Now, of course, if I reload the app, we're back to the auth form because I'm not storing that token. So that is something I want to do. And for that, I'll go to my auth context file, and in there I'll add a new helper function, save token, which accepts a token. And in there I want to store it, and I will store it in local storage here. And I know that that there definitely I will probably get the question whether that is a good idea, if I should not use cookies. And the answer is cookies are slightly better. But if your app is vulnerable to cross-site scripting attacks, which is the problem everyone mentions with local storage, if your site is vulnerable to cross-site scripting attacks, you have big problems anyways. And it does not matter too much where you store that token, because it is true, if you use a HTTP-only secure token, it can't be read from client-side JavaScript code. But it will be attached automatically to outgoing requests. So if your site is vulnerable to cross-site scripting attacks, the attacker can inject code that sends requests from your site to wherever they want to send those requests, and the cookie with the valid token will be attached automatically. So it can send those requests then to your backend and do stuff you might not want to happen. So that's why it really doesn't matter too much here. So that's why I'm using local storage. Now I don't just want to store the token here. I also want to store the expiration. Thank you, GitHub Copilot. though yeah, let's name it token expiration, why not? And this is, I typically write it like this to make it very clear that this is 60 minutes, because it's 60 seconds times 60 minutes is 1 hour. And since we actually have milliseconds here, I take it times 1000. And I will actually store that in ISO string format. Yeah, right. For that, I'll again wrap this with the date constructor and call to, whoops, where is my cursor? To ISO string, like this. Okay, so I'll store the expiration. And I want to call this here whenever I set the token. Then I will also save it, because whenever I set the token, I get a new token. So I will save it. And I know that the expiration is 1 hour because that is what I set on the server. Now, it would be a bit better to actually send the expiration from the server to the frontend in the response and extract it dynamically there. But here again, to keep it a bit simpler, and since I'm building both frontend and backend, I'll just use my own, I'll just add the logic here. Okay, so that will save it. And with that saved, we of course also need to extract it whenever this app loads, whenever the app starts, so that I can initialize my token state here with any stored token if we have any. Now, there are different ways of doing that. You could, for example, use a fact here, so that whenever the auth context provider runs for the first time, which you can achieve by setting an empty dependencies array, you take a look at local storage, you extract the token, check if it's still valid, and update your state. This, however, is not great. For one, it would probably lead to your app flickering, because the component gets rendered before useEffect runs. So it would only get the token after the UI has been rendered for the first time. So the user would always see the unauthenticated UI before it's actually updated, which is not great. In addition, you also simply don't need it, because local storage is a synchronous API. It's not async, so you can easily run it before that function here is even executed. What I mean is we can put it here into a separate function, or actually even in the file itself if we want to. We can add our code right here into the file itself, not even wrapped in a function. We can get our stored token by accessing local storage, and we get the expiration like this. And we got an initial token, sure, and we check if we got a stored token, if we extracted something from local storage, then we convert the stored token expiration, which is a string in this ISO string format. We convert this to a date object, and we check if that's greater than the current timestamp, the current date time. So if it's in the future, if the expiration date is in the future, because only if it's in the future, only then is this a valid token. And then we set this initial token variable to the stored token, because we know we have a stored token and it's still valid. Else we can actually clean up the local storage, because whatever was stored there is not valid anymore. And now we can pass this initial token as an initial state to use state. And this code will execute before this function runs. So when this function runs for the first time, we'll have our stored token loaded into this context, so to say. So no need for a useEffect or anything like that. And that should make sure that the token gets stored. We can also add a logout function now, where I update my state to set the token to null so that the UI is updated, but I also remove it from local storage now, of course. So that if the user reloads the app and comes back in the future, there is no old token lying around. Why am I not using arrow functions here? Really just preference. You can use whatever you want. Okay, now with that, back in app.jsx. No, actually, it should just work. With that, if I reload, now if I log in again with valid credentials, I get this image gen dummy text. If I reload now, I also get this because my token was stored. We can also see this here. Oh, wow, that's a lot. I'm normally not using, here, application. I'm normally not using Edge. Here under local storage, we can see those two entries. Okay, you can probably not see them, I reckon, because there is the chat in front of it. Oh, yeah. Wait a second. I set this up such that I can actually temporarily disable this overlay. Okay, so now you see these two entries here. And if I were to delete one here, or both, if I delete both, I'm logged out again, of course. So that's, of course, not the idea, but that proves that this is working. Okay. Let me bring back the chat now. So with that done, we have a way of staying logged in. We have a way of logging in to begin with. And we now need a way of logging out, of course. We need to work on that header where I want to add a logout button. That's it, right? And then we'll work on that form. So here in the header, below my title, I want to show a logout button if we are logged in. So for that, I need my auth context, of course. And I'll extract the token and the logout function. And then I'll check if we have a token, which means we are logged in. And in that case, I want to render we can render a form, or we can keep it simple. Simply render a button here. Render a button. Give it a margin to the top of 2. Text stone 200. Hover text stone 400. And then here I'll say logout. We need an on-click listener, which will simply be that logout function. Whoops, that logout function here, which I'm getting from my context. So that logout function, which clears the token, both in the storage and in my state. So with that, I have the logout button here. If I click it, I am taken back. So that's working the way it should. Awesome. Let's also try creating a new user again, just to make sure that this really works. Who needs testing if you can just manually test it, right? Okay, so that works. Finally, we can now start working on that image generation again, which of course is also still a bit of a more complex part. So, good place to take another sip. To stay hydrated. By the way, if you got any feedback for this stream, anything you don't like, or you do like, please let me know. It's basically my first stream here on Twitch. So any feedback is appreciated. Okay, so let's work on this image generation thing here. In here, I want to output a form. And I did actually already prepare the markup for that, because it's really just me adding a bunch of divs and stuff, but I will walk you through it, of course. No worries. So let me make sure I copy the right thing here. Okay, so I need that here. That's a form, and I'll explain it in a second, no worries. I'll remove the action for now, and I also prepared some classes for the surrounding div. And we'll add more markup later, but that's it for now. Now I need to add a bunch of imports. So I need the form, need the input container, Actually, okay, it does not suggest it, so let's do it like this. Label. And did I import input already? No. Okay. So what do I have here? I have a div, of course, with some Tailwind classes on it. And then I have the form component, which I built before, the input container, the label, and the input components, which I all built before already. This input here, by the way, is for the prompt, and I set this is text area prop to true. You might remember that's this prop I accept there, which controls whether we render a text area or an input, regular input. So here I'll render a text area for the prompt because that's the first input I have. Then thereafter I have a div really just to render the next bunch of inputs next to each other side by side. And in there I'll have an input which allows me to set a quality for the image that should be generated. It's a regular input of type number where I set a min and a maximum value and a step size and a default value and a CSS class, Tailwind class here. Then I have an input for the aspect ratio, which is a dropdown, a select with a default value, and then these three options, which are all supported by replicate, and also some Tailwind classes. And next to that, I'll have another dropdown for the format, which allows me to choose a WebP, a PNG, or a JPEG file. The default is PNG here. And then below that, I have a paragraph with a button that is disabled if is pending. That will become important later. I'll remove it for now, which also just has some Tailwind CSS classes on it. And depending on whether the form is currently being submitted or not, I'll say generating or generate. So I can bring back disabled here too, I guess, because I'll soon have is pending. I'll have this variable soon. I don't have it yet, but we'll soon have it once I add a form action. So that will be my form. I, of course, also need a place where I display the image that has been generated. And for that, I'll add a div next to that form. And it will be next to that form visually because the surrounding div, which includes both the form and that newly added div, has a flex class on it. So it will render these elements next to each other and constrain the width and so on. Now, I also got some classes prepared for that already. But I'll add the actual markup in there a little bit later once we have the logic for generating that image. So let me just quickly catch up what you're saying. So seems like you're liking it. Thank you so much for all being part of that. It's been a long stream already, I guess. I don't know how long people typically stream. For me, it's long. So really awesome to still have you all here. Would have loved to get to the image generating part on UI a bit faster. Yeah, the problem, yeah, I see that. You wouldn't have to add the authentication. Yeah. I mean, we added it on the backend already, but I see what you mean. However, the recording will be on YouTube, so you can all watch it there again. You can, of course, skip ahead. Yeah, but it's a good point. Okay. There won't be any upload, by the way, Galmeda. There won't be any upload. It's just download. We'll just send a prompt and get back an image. Okay, so let's start working on that so that we get there eventually, I guess. So what we need to do, of course, is need to add another form action. So I'll name it submit action. And yep, that's the correct signature because I'll also use action state just as before and pass my submit action to it so that I get back the updated action and the is pending value, which I use down there for disabling the button and so on. And it's then this action here, which wraps my action, which I'll set to the action prop of this form. So that's the submit action now. In the submit action, I now want to gather the user input and send my request to the backend. So let's start with gathering the input. And you might recall, or you might not, because it's been some time, that on the backend, in the generate image route, we expect to get a request that gets a prompt and an options object. And that options object actually can have an aspect ratio property written like this, a format or a quality property. So that's what we can submit here. We could, of course, also add more validation on the back end to enforce this structure. But here, since I wrote both to save some time, I'll just make sure that I pass the correct format. Okay, so what I'll do here is I'll get my prompt from form data prompt. Prompt because that is the name I chose down there. I'll also construct my options object here by getting quality, aspect ratio, and format, setting these key names, which are the names that are expected on the backend. And these here in the quotes, the strings, these are the names I have on my inputs here. So that's the data that needs to be submitted to the backend. So now to submit it to the backend, I'll add a new helper function here. We could also add it in a separate file, of course, but here I'll add it here. Send image request could be the name. And here I expect to get an object from which I can destructure my prompt and options, or I just expect to get these two arguments, these two parameters, doesn't matter. And I'll send a request, however, not to API image, but instead to localhost 3000 generate image. That is my endpoint here, and it's localhost 3000. So that is what I sent the request to. Post request, send my data, content type application JSON. If response is not okay, I'll throw an error, right? I think I'm not interested in the error message sent back from the server here. To keep things simple, I'll just set this generic error message. And if things worked, I will actually get back this image as a bunch of bytes in the end. So actually here I'll not get back JSON data, but instead I can extract it as a blob with help of the blob function method on this response object. So that's the default response object provided by the browser, by JavaScript in the browser. And we have a blob method there, which will basically turn this bunch of bytes, which we got on the response, into a blob JavaScript object, which we can use here on the front end. So I got my image blob here. And it's then this image blob, which we can return, or what I want to do is indeed what was suggested to me here. I want to use the URL class API, which is also built into the browser, which you can use for constructing URL objects, which can be helpful for extracting data from more complex URLs. But you can also use it here to use the static create object URL method, which takes a blob, which is conveniently what we have here, and which gives us a base 64 encoded string. And what that is in the end, a string which we can use as a value for the source attribute of the default HTML image element. So this allows us to use this returned image directly, or not directly, but after converting it, as a value for the source property of the HTML, of the image HTML element. So that's pretty convenient. That's why I'm doing this conversion here, so that I get back this blob and I convert it into a format that I can use as a value for the image element. I hope I could make this clear. The alternative, or one alternative, by the way, would be to store the image on the server, of course, instead of sending it back to the client like this. We could have stored it on the server, and we could have then sent back a URL to that image stored on the server to the client. That might actually be the more elegant approach, but now I went with this approach, and I think it's interesting to see that too. But that would have been a nice alternative now that I think about it. So yeah, but here I'll go with that approach. Take the base 64 encoded string here. And this is, of course, now in a separate function. So that is the function we now need to call here in submit action after we gathered the user input. So that will again be an async function, because send image request is an async function too, and I need to await it. So I got my image URL, this base64 string, by calling await send image request. Now I will try this because we could have an error here. This could fail. I mean, we are throwing an error here after all. So we should try this, and we should of course then set some state here in the image generation component. Or actually we can get fancy, I guess. Since I'm in a form action and I use the use action state hook, what we can do here, instead of managing state manually, what we can do is we can return an object here. We can return a value here in this action function, and that will then be made available through the use action state. That's what this first argument here will actually be. Yeah, no source definitions. So here we'll actually get our form state. We can call it like this, and that will be whatever we return here. So we also need to set an initial state here then later on, because if the form has not been submitted yet, this would otherwise be undefined, which could also be fine, but which I don't want here. But I'll get back to this. And I know it's a lot right now, but we'll get there. So we got the image URL, and since we're in a form action, I'll return such an object here, and I'll set a result key and set it to success to indicate that we return a success state from this action here. And I'll add my image URL, which is this image URL, like that. If we catch an error, I'll also return a value, but now it will be the same object with result set to error, and instead of an image URL, I have a message property set to my error message. Now here for the initial state, which will be the value assigned to form state if the form has not been submitted yet, I'll set the result to null because I have no result yet. I've neither submitted it with success nor with an error. So I'll use null, and I'll use that later to update the UI accordingly, depending on whether it's null, success, or error. That's the plan here. Yeah, I might also use Cloudinary. That is absolutely correct. You could of course use any CDN. You could also use something like AWS S3. That would also work. Okay, so now that we have the result, which is either a success with the image or an error with the error message, let's start with the success case. Why not? So we got the form state, which will be that object here. Or it will be this initial object if the form has not been submitted yet. So it will be an object either way that has a result key. And the result key either holds success, error, or null. So down here where I added this div, where I want to show the actual image, I can now use this state to show a different piece of UI depending on it. So we can check if form state result. So if it's null, which means the form has not been submitted yet, in that case, I want to show a paragraph where I'll say press generate to generate an image based on your prompt. Because if I log in here, we have a button named generate. So that's why I have this text. And the formatting is off here. We'll fix that soon. Okay, so that's that. Now for the formatting, I'll simply add a class name here, textstone 400, P8, and font mono. Still, I'm not sure why it's positioned here. And I think these also should have a different style. But we can take care about styling later. Let's instead now also check for success, which is the good case where we have an image. And then I want to render a regular image element where the source is set to form state image URL. That's what I mentioned before. That's our base 64 encoded string in the end, which holds the image data, which can be rendered by the image element. And here for the alt text, we can actually use our prompt. So let's actually go up here where I return the image URL, and let's simply return back the prompt. We got the prompt already. We extracted it from the user input, so we can return it back with our state, and that allows us to use it down there as an alt text, because that should describe the image really well. And for the class name here, I'll give this a height of, let's say, 25 rem, shadow 2xl, and rounded MD. And let's simply see if that works. Let's render a cake, keep the default settings, generate. We got no feedback whilst it's generating, but it looks like something went wrong. Unauthorized, yep, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. We have authentication on the backend. We need the token to be attached to the request being sent to the backend. And of course, we're managing the token on the front end, but I'm not attaching it to the outgoing request here. That is the problem. So I'll actually accept a third argument here, auth token, in my send image request function, and add my authorization header here, where I add the token in the same format we used earlier for testing the backend. So bara, white space, and then the actual token. Now we just need to make sure that the token argument is passed to send image request. So we need the token here, and for that we need access to the auth context through our use auth context hook in the image generation component. Send the token as a third argument to send image request. And now with that, let's try it again, a cake. And connection refused. Looks like we got some server-side error. Let's see what is wrong here. Whoa, that's a lot of output. Okay, request to the replicate API failed with unprocessable entity. The output quality we requested is an invalid type. It expected an integer, but we gave it a string. That seems to be the only problem though. And so that means we send the quality, we extract the quality from the form, and that will be a string because all data, all input in forms is a string. Even if it's a number input, it will be a string from a data type perspective. So we send that to the backend, and there it would be a string anyways because we send it as part of a HTTP request, so it's converted to, no, forget what I said. It's JSON, so it could be a number, but either way, we extracted it from. So what we should do is on the backend, in our image.js file, we should add a plus here in front of quality to ensure that this will be a number. That's a quick and easy way of fixing it. With that done, let's try it again. So first of all, I'll reload. Did I save the backend? Yeah, I did. Let's see. And here's a cake. Yay, it worked. It worked. Let's also try a different aspect ratio, like a horse and a quality of 72 and a WebP. That looks like a horse to me. So that worked. The cake is a lie. That is true. That is true. Yeah, form will return a string. Absolutely. So we're almost done. Yay. I mean, there's a lot of cleanup and polishing we could do, but that worked. Now, just to finish it up, I also want to handle the last form state here, where result is an error, because that, of course, could happen. And in that case, I will simply return a paragraph where I output form state error. I think that's what I named it. No, message. Message holds the error message. So form state message. And I'll add a class name here of text red 200. So if I now try to submit an empty form, okay, it produces something. It produces something. I would need to add validation on the back end. So I guess I have no yeah, it's fine. I would have to add validation on the back end to not accept empty strings, empty prompts. Yeah, let's do that. Let's do it. Why not? So here in app.js, let's check if not prompt or prompt trim length is equal to 0. I'll send back an error response. And on the front end, exactly, we're throwing an error. Check your input. So let's try again with an empty. Yeah, so now I got this error message here. Okay, so that's now all working. Alt is wrong. The alt text is wrong. You are absolutely right. Thank you so much. Form state prompt. Okay. So let's see. Let's go with the cake again. Let's inspect it. And we got the right alt text now. Okay. So that's it. The AI site I'm using, I think it was already answered, but the AI site I'm using is Replicate. Replicate.com. Is it? Yeah, replicate.com. It's a site where you can access all kinds of AI models through convenient APIs and SDKs. Okay, so that's it. Obviously, there is polishing we could do. You could improve the styling. You could add better error handling. There are definitely edge cases that are not handled, that might not work as expected. This is the purpose here really was to have like a nice demo project, which does not take like 10 hours. And I think it is that. We could improve it in future sessions. We could build other stuff. I will make sure that the code is available on GitHub as soon as possible, tomorrow probably. So you can also dive into this. I'll upload a recording of this stream here on YouTube. Maybe I'll split it in 2 parts for the discussion at the beginning and then this project. We'll see. But I'll make all that available, and I hope you like this. As I mentioned before, I'd love to do more streams like that. So there's probably a lot I can learn about Twitch, things we can do here. I mean, at this time, I'm not even an affiliate, leave alone a partner. So I think there are some things I just can't do, or that just can't happen on this channel. But we'll see where this all goes in the future. Yeah, but I definitely would love to stream more often. This was a lot of fun, and there's so much you can do. So many demo projects we can build. As I mentioned before, I am thinking about getting into languages like SIG this year, or relearning C. So that could also be interesting stuff for streams. Configuring servers, Docker, deployment stuff. Yeah, lots of exciting stuff. So if you liked it, I really liked it. Let's see. Yeah, looks like you liked it. Thank you so much. It really means a lot to me. I was not sure how that would all go, if it's too long, and yeah. Does better auth require a separate server? Not necessarily, but better auth would probably be implemented with a package. For example, conveniently with better auth. Oh, you probably asked for this package, I think. No, this does not require a separate server. You can use this better auth package on the same server in the same app where you have the rest of your logic. looking at this package might also be interesting in a future stream. Yeah, so thank you all so much for joining. More than 100 people still here after 3.5 hours. I know other streamers have like thousands of people. For me, it really means so much to have you all here. It's super exciting that you all like this. I liked it a lot. Thank you so much. And yeah, since there's another question regarding course updates, I try my best to keep all the courses updated. Get lots of different things that impact that. Time is obviously one, but also that there are customers, actually a decent size or a decent amount of customers who are not too happy about updates. So I'll always try to balance it, but I'm doing my best. I'll try my best to release some nice updates this year too, of course. So thank you all so much for joining. Hopefully see you in the future. I'm not sure how that works. Follow this channel to be notified. Of course, I'll also let you know on Discord and YouTube and wherever. And one last plug. I got this book here, React Key Concepts, 2nd edition, fully updated for React 19. Got some brand new sections. So if you sometimes, like I do, like picking up books and want to learn all about React, that book might be interesting for you. You can go to maximilianschwarzmüller.com. That's also a nice project, by the way. A /book, not /book as it seems. Here, it's just maximilianschwarzmüller.com, written like this, and then book to learn all about it. And that would be a nice project, improving the site, because it's a very basic site. So maybe also that. You remember your Bootstrap course like 10 years ago. Man, I had a lot of interesting courses in Serious back then. I also had a lot of Laravel content 9 years ago or so. That would also be amazing, getting back into Laravel and maybe do something there. Yeah, streaming on YouTube and X as well. I'll have to look into that. I did deliberately not do it for this stream because there was lots of new stuff already. And I wanted to keep it a bit simpler and not stream to like 3 different platforms. I'll probably also have to look into moderation and see if there are ways for me to better keep up with the chat, because that was super challenging. But yeah, definitely lots of things I'll explore, and lots of things that will probably evolve over time. Yeah, my book does cover React Router 7. There weren't too many changes though, so it's essentially the code you wrote for React Router 6 essentially still works for 7. And the things that did change are covered in the book. Yeah, the Angular JS 2 course, the beta times back then, yeah. It's really cool to see some people who were there since the beginning, since the early days. It's been a long time. Man, web development in this entire industry changed so much since then. And YouTube changed so much. It was so fun back then, I tell you. Maybe streaming will be the new YouTube for me when it comes to that, because it was so much fun 8 years ago that you could simply create tutorial series content where you would like build a project across 20 videos and people would watch that. And you would, or in general, tutorial videos. And nowadays it must be that super pumped up, hyper loud stuff, 5 minutes at most. I miss those old days. I'm getting old. I did actually not take down my old Laravel videos. Let me see. It's on the Academy channel. I do now kind of split my attention. I also have like the my own channel now, and I'll probably release more content on that. But I do have all those old Laravel videos 8 years ago on the Academy channel. But they're a bit outdated. But if you want to see my old days, yeah, you can try them. I did take down the Laravel course on Udemy, if that's what you mean. That is correct. I did take it down there. Yeah. The URL for my site, let me see if I can share URLs here, links here, because I disabled it, because I was not sure if it's a good idea to let people share links here. Let's see if I can share links. I can, so that's the link to my site. Yeah. Yeah, the good old times. I mean, Laravel is still super popular, probably more popular than ever, right? It's I just switched to Node.js at some point and then JavaScript, but it would be interesting to get back into Laravel, to be honest. I would probably have to relearn PHP because I haven't written PHP in like 8 or 7 years, but hey, could be fun too. But again, improving my own website, maybe adding a blog, and in general, making it a bit better, that would also be an interesting project. Yeah, thank you so much, Gallifrey87. Thank you, and thank you all so much for all the amazing feedback and for having you here and participating in my courses and the stream and so much. It really means so much to me. Really, really, really amazing. You're all amazing people. I'm a new developer trying to switch careers completely. I'm self-taught, taking courses and following along with other YouTube tutorials. Do you have tips? I think what's important, so what I said at the beginning, you probably weren't there regarding AI and that you should use it but not rely on it. That's important. You want to build your own knowledge, you want to dive deeper, and when you're learning to code or when you're learning anything, you have to make the jump out of the tutorial environment, out of tutorial hell, as you could call it, and actually start building stuff. Even if it's just stupid side projects, just build simplified clones of something, apply your knowledge, because otherwise you'll be stuck in tutorial hell. And obviously I sell courses. I like it when people take my courses, but I do create these courses because I want people to learn something. I want people to succeed. So you really have to make that step and build something at some point. Yeah, when it comes to PHP, I actually also I built my own PHP framework back then to learn PHP. It was not production ready. It was not even complete, I think, but I built a kind of complete framework that handled requests, rendered returned responses, rendered views, all that stuff. So yeah, fun times. Fun times. Yeah. So I think I'll wrap it up here. Grab something to eat. And this definitely was not the last stream. I hope I see you again in future streams. I'll let you know on all the channels I have. Except for Udemy, it's a bit difficult there. I can't send out too many announcements there. But on Discord, my YouTube channel. So you find links below here on Twitch to all these to my site and to Discord. No, not to Discord, I think. But yeah, you can go to Academind.com community. And there you can sign up for a newsletter and Discord. And that might be something I add to my own website too. It's all like building up right now, so we'll get there. But yeah. What do I use to stay up to date? And what am I eating? So eating, it might be McDonald's today. I'll see. Everything has closed already, and I was not sure how long this would take. So yeah, probably not too healthy, but not too bad either. Sometimes it's nice. And what do I use to stay up to date? X a lot. It's a horrible, great platform. If you follow the right people and aggressively tell X in which content you're not interested in, it's a decent news source for me. So that's where I typically learn as early as possible about new versions, new libraries, new trends, stuff like that. And then if I want to learn something new, like a new language, I use docs, tutorials, and I also like learning with books, indeed, if there are good books available. Currently, I'm not hiring. Sorry, if that changes, I'll of course let you know. And just call it Twitter. Yeah, you're right. Twitter X, like this weird phase a year ago when everybody always said like, hey, I posted this on X/Twitter. So yeah. I also prefer Twitter, such a better name. X is, you can't even Google that. No, I'm located in Munich, or I'm near Munich right now. The office is outside of Munich. There are restaurants that are open, but I want to head back to my wife. Don't want to like go to a restaurant alone and spend a lot of time there. So I'll probably just grab something from McDonald's and then go home, something like that. How did I become such a good developer? I'm not sure if I'm such a good developer. I'm just, well, of course, I simply have a lot of experience. That helps. I write code since I'm 13, not all the time, but that's when I started and I never really lost it. And then since 10 years, 11 years, 10 years, I do it professionally all the time. And before that, I also had phases where I coded a lot. So it's really just practice. But you also never stop learning. It's always something new. Which language am I going to use to update my website, Academine? So I'll probably not update Academine right now. I'll probably update my own site, maximilianschwarzmüller.com. And I built that with Astro.js, which is a pretty nice framework. And I'll probably stick to that for that because it's not a super complex site and Astro is actually a lot of fun. And you could also build more complex sites with it. Don't get me wrong, but yeah. I'll pay for your McDonald's by buying the book. Thank you so much. That's really amazing. When you work, do you work secluded like in an office or do you prefer to work in coffee shops or outside? I have an office. I really like that. I'm not a coffee shop guy. And also my work includes some recording. So obviously I need like a recording studio, something like that, which I have here. And yeah, I'm just not the kind of guy to go into a coffee shop for that. Works for other people, but not really for me. Yeah, thank you all so much. You're so amazing. All the support, buying courses, books. Oh man, that's really amazing. Yeah, Astro is fun. Yeah, the VOD will be made available on YouTube. I'll try to upload it tomorrow or over the next few days. I just might split it in 2 parts for the discussion at the beginning and then the project. The book does not have the same content. I mean, it's about React, so of course there is in the end the same content as in the React course, but I did not refactor projects. It has a different structure. It's not the script of the course, if you mean that. I don't use scripts for one, but it's also not the transcript. It's a totally separate product. Has nothing to do with the book except for that it's about the same topic. So of course it has kind of the same content, if you know what I mean. How do I get into a flow state of mind when working? I don't always get into one. I sometimes have to force myself into one, but for coding, it's really not that difficult. When I start coding, it just happens most of the time that I can just go on, and I really like coding. I mean, AI is one thing when you look at jobs and how it might impact you there and impact me too, of course, but I also hope that AI will never take my job because I just like it too much, to be honest. Do I have a preferred operating system for development? I do work on Mac OS. I considered using pure Linux because I also want to get better at Linux, if you can say it like this. But yeah, I'll probably stick to Mac OS. I like that a lot. How do you keep up to date with all the new frameworks? The good thing is, unlike 5 or 6 years ago, there aren't like 10 new JavaScript frameworks every year. And the existing frameworks, yeah, they are innovating, but there is a decent amount of stability there. So Maybe it's just because I'm constantly working with all this stuff, but to me it doesn't feel like everything's changing all the time. It was definitely worse a couple of years ago, I would say. Have you published, participated in any commercial app in the stores? So if I have released an app, I have not. I did actually 15 years ago. It's not online anymore. It was a simple shopping list app, though a shopping list app that would sync across multiple devices so that you could also share it with your partner, because I built it for my girlfriend and me. But it's not online anymore because there are simply better shopping list apps now. So currently I have no published app, but as I mentioned at the beginning, I have some project ideas, non-course projects, including an app, which I might build this year. Maybe also partially on stream. We'll see. Tools I use on my computer that you cannot work without. Here on the Mac, so obviously I need tools like OBS and VS Code, which I use. I also use Raycast, simply to quickly access certain things. I use Dropbox for syncing content and storing some content in the cloud. But I don't have too many tools, I guess. Would have a hard time thinking about must-have tools. For example, I don't use any complex project management or productivity tools. I use standard Apple Notes, and just to do simple bullet point lists in there. I tried them all. I tried complex apps where you could build projects with to-dos, with nested to-dos, and I just spent all my time creating these lists and did not get them done. So yeah, I don't use too many apps. I play video games. I love video games. I'm currently playing Cyberpunk 2077 because I haven't played it before. I'm now 50 hours into it, loving it. And I played a lot as a child. Played a lot of World of Warcraft. Way too much. Played all the classics back then when I was a child, like Diablo 2, Age of Empires, and so on. I absolutely love gaming, yeah. I also worked on some client projects in the past, yeah. Not just courses. And internal stuff and so on. But yeah, as I mentioned, would definitely also love to release some or build some products, build some apps, whatever, this year too. We'll see. Time is always the issue. I'm not so much a conference guy, since I'm getting asked if I want to attend like React Berlin or anything like that. I don't know. I'm more like a lone wolf. I don't know. Maybe I should. I like connecting with people, but I always feel like I don't fit in with like the React community and so on. I don't know why. Does knowing data structure and algorithm help? Yeah, I think for some or many companies, they do require it as part of the hiring process. They do ask you for it in interviews. So that's why I need to know it. I'm personally not a fan of that because I'll be very honest with you. I haven't done complex algorithms for some time. I would probably not be able to solve them right now, especially if it's like a pressure situation. I have limited time. I might not be able to like do that. So you really have to prepare for that. You have to practice that. You have to get into the right way of thinking, and then you can do it. But yeah, I think it's still a thing. I'm not a fan of it, but yeah, if you need it for the job you want to get, there's no way around it, unfortunately. Guild Wars, I played that too. I played way more World of Warcraft though, but a bit of Guild Wars too. Yeah, all those old classics. Since there's a question about agentic stuff, so AI agents, LangGraph, I'm not sure. To me, it currently sounds a bit to me like every app where you have like an API trigger an LLM is already agentic, especially if you then use the output of the LLM to do something else. So it sounds a bit like a rebranding to me. Automation is now AI agents. So of course, in theory, being able to like hand a complex task to an AI and it will then perform it sounds great. The question just is, will that work that well anytime soon? Especially since a lot of complex tasks might not work on the internet alone. They might require physical input or something like that at some point. So yeah, but of course, in general, using all these new AI capabilities to build better automations and then maybe calling them agentic or something like that is definitely a good thing, and definitely something to watch out for this year, I guess. My best VS Code extensions for productivity, stuff like the standard stuff, I guess, like prettier. I mean, we can take a look. Let me see. Which extensions do I have installed? Yeah, Angular for the Angular development, Angular language service, Astro. Yeah, I don't need the AWS toolkit, but I got it here. Code Sandbox I used in the past, but don't use it anymore too much. Dart for Flutter development, Docker for some help with writing Docker files and stuff like that. EJS, I haven't used that in a while. ESLint, though I'm really not a linting fan. Flutter, GitHub Actions for monitoring them from inside VS Code. Go, of course, like all these language servers or language-specific extensions for languages I worked with. Yeah. I think nothing too fancy. Really just, I want to be productive with the languages I'm working with. And I'll download like the main extension for that language then, and that's typically it. Like the REST client, which I use today for replacing Postman and sending and testing requests to REST APIs from inside VS Code. That's really nice. Stuff like that, yeah. League of Legends, by the way, I never played it. I heard the community is pretty toxic. I like watching it. I like in general, like watching esports, and it's super fun to watch League of Legends there. How to learn React in a short time? Through projects, or should I just go through the topics first? I would recommend like picking up a basic tutorial. For example, if you're taking my course on Udemy, there is like an essentials, a couple of essentials sections that are labeled essentials. If you go through them, you have like a solid foundation. And then if you then start building projects, you'll encounter lots of stuff that's difficult. You can then go back to the course, find solutions there, and also simply use Google and stuff to find solutions there. So that's like the hardcore way of quickly learning something. It's a very steep learning curve if you only like get the base minimum foundation, but it can be a very good strategy, good way, if you can handle that steep learning curve. Do you think Remix is better than Next.js? Next.js, like the biggest problem I have with Next.js is it still has some annoying niche bugs, and the development server is slow, and it feels a bit unstable, meaning there are relatively big changes across major versions, at least in the past. I hope not so much in the future, but yeah, I guess Remix also has changes, but it felt a bit more stable to me. But Next.js is definitely the more popular one. So though we will see now that Remix got merged in React Router 7, maybe that will change. Better auth versus next auth. I think better auth looks amazing and way more feature complete than next auth. My advice for someone to get back into the coding world when they have been on a hiatus for personal reasons depends on which kind of programming you do. But I guess getting back into projects and writing code is the way to go, because that gets your hands dirty. That quickly shows you where you need to do some catch-up work. And then, of course, for the languages or libraries you're working with, research what changed there, what are the latest versions, what are the changes for those latest versions, and yeah, I think once you start building stuff again, you'll be up and running quickly again, because it's a bit like cycling, right? You don't really lose it. If I go back to a language or a framework I haven't used in a while, it's tough at the beginning, but you quickly get back into it. At what age did you start learning about web development coding? I started 12 or 13, one of the two. So really early. I mentioned it before, I started with C and kind of simultaneously shortly after switched to web development, because C is obviously like the best language to learn as a 12-year-old. Regarding the crisis in software development, I talked about this at the beginning, and I will upload this part to my YouTube channel, Maximilian Schwarzmüller on YouTube. So that is, I think it's also linked below this stream, but just to be sure and not waste this opportunity. So I'll upload the VODs here. Is using decorators in JavaScript useful? Decorators are a niche feature, I'd say. To be honest, outside of Angular, I haven't really worked with decorators. So to be honest, regarding the age when you start, I did start with 12. That's true. And it was always like a hobby for me. Kind of a fun story regarding that. But then from, I guess, 18 to 25, 24, I barely coded, because that was when I went to university and I studied business administration. I did not study anything programming related, business administration. I worked in a bank and consultancy thereafter. So I started early, but I also had a break. So yeah, if you like it, it's never too late. Also because I learned some stuff back then, which I honestly don't need at all anymore. So yeah, but it's fun to have like all these old memories, I guess. And for example, what I really like to do with 14, 15, I would like mod PC games. Like, I don't know if anyone here knows Operation Flashpoint. It's like a shooter, a military simulation from 2002 or something like this. And you could build like your own scenarios, your own missions, and you could do a lot of coding there. And I did that hardcore. I like that a lot. Yeah. Will I ever make courses about C#, .NET, Swift, iOS? Swift, probably not, because if I build a mobile app, I'll probably do it with React Native or Flutter. C#, maybe, because one other area I'd love to get into, maybe this year, if there is some time between all the other projects, would be game dev. Simply playing around with Godot or Unity, that would be fun. Yeah, exactly. You could upload faces and you could build entire missions and stuff in Flashpoint, so that was fun, yeah. Okay, so let's wrap it up here. It's been 4 hours. Sounds like a good point to stop. Was not the last stream. I liked it a lot. I'm super happy that you also seem to like it. Sign up on Discord on the academy.com/community link I shared earlier, if you don't want to miss anything here. And follow here and stuff in my YouTube channel, and see you in the future. So thank you so much for being part of today. Bye.